And around 140 million people in Bangladesh were without power on Tuesday afternoon after a grid failure there caused widespread blackouts. We begin here in the United States today, where the Department of Justice has begun its prosecution of the founder of the far-right group, the Oath Keepers. Stewart Rhodes and 4 others are accused of trying to overturn the outcome of America's 2020 presidential election when they stormed the U.S. Capitol building on January the 6th of last year. Prosecutors urged a jury to convict Rhodes and his fellow Oath Keepers, saying some were clad in paramilitary gear as part of an alleged plot forcefully to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. The case is high stakes for both the Biden administration and the Republican Party, and the evidence the court will hear could also cause fresh challenges for former US President Donald Trump, just as he is believed to be preparing to launch a fresh bid for the White House. Rhodes and his co-defendants are accused of plotting to prevent Congress from certifying President Biden's 2020 election win. The 5 on trial face numerous felony charges, including seditious conspiracy. It carries a statutory maximum sentence of 20 years in jail. Prosecutors have characterized the Oath Keepers as a far-right anti-government group. Many of its members include current and former military and law enforcement personnel.
And the government doesn't necessarily have to show that in that moment they were planning on bringing guns to the Capitol. What the government has to show is that the Oath Keepers and Stewart Rhodes entered into a conspiracy, an agreement to at some point use force to prevent the execution of any law, hear the certification of the Electoral College vote, and that they took some overt acts in furtherance of that conspiracy.
Trump supporters, of course, stormed the U.S. Capitol in January of last year after former President Trump falsely claimed the election had been stolen from him. 5 people died during the riots and shortly after them, and about 140 police were injured. For more on all of this, WION's US correspondent Susan Tehrani joins us live from New York today. Susan, we have seen in the past few weeks courts here in Washington very willing to throw the book at defendants in cases linked to January the 6th when they are convicted. Outline the charges for us and tell us how much difficulty Stewart Rhodes and these other members of the Oath Keepers are facing.
So, as you rightly mentioned, Simon, the founder of the Oath Keeper and 4 associates, they allegedly planned for an armed rebellion, and they have pleaded not guilty to charges of a sedition conspiracy. This is a charge rarely brought up by the Justice Department. And then there are numerous other charges. We keep hearing about these other numerous charges of rebellion. This is a sedition of conspiracy is a Civil War era statute, as we mentioned, that is rarely prosecuted. It carries a statutory maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, and the last time that it was used was decades ago. So Merrick Garland and the Justice Department face a really long an uphill battle on trying to really use this sedition of conspiracy. An attorney for Rhodes, however, argues that the prosecutors built their case on cherry-picked evidence like messages and videos, and the Oath Keepers were not involved with violence during the riots, notably because Rhodes himself didn't even enter the Capitol building during that day. But this is the first high-level prosecution hearing that we're seeing after 2 years of detention. So it is definitely going to carry a lot of theatrics, and the optics are very important. But whether or not they'll be prosecuted is yet to be seen.
And, of course, indicative of the Department of Justice warning that they will leave no stone unturned in their January the 6th investigations. WION's US correspondent Susan Tehrani joining us live from New York today. Other news from here today. Former US President Donald Trump is suing CNN for defamation. He's accusing the news network of smearing him to undermine his potential run for the White House in 2024 as part of what he called a concerted effort to tilt the country's political balance to the left. Trump is seeking $475 million in punitive damages. Legal papers were filed in Florida on Monday. The former president claims CNN tainted his reputation by using descriptives of him that included the words racist, Russian lackey, insurrectionist, and what his team insists was a false comparison to Adolf Hitler. His lawyers say that a comparison with, quote, arguably the most heinous figure in modern history is evidence that CNN had actual malice towards the former president. And the Trump team argues that despite America's First Amendment guaranteeing freedom of speech, the Hitler comparison meets the required threshold to pursue a defamation claim. The filing also accuses CNN of highlighting negative information about Trump and ignoring all positive information about him in what the former president's lawyers argue was an effort to defeat him politically. CNN has not yet commented on the case. Meanwhile, this lawsuit comes as the former president faces considerable legal trouble elsewhere. An ongoing criminal investigation by the Department of Justice against Trump for retaining classified government records at his Mar-a-Lago residence. He's also being sued by New York's Attorney General for conspiracy after being accused of inflating the value of his business assets to secure loans on favorable terms. And up on Capitol Hill, there are also, of course, ongoing investigations by a congressional committee that continues to probe the January 6th Capitol Hill riot.
You may be seated.
With the November midterm elections here just a month away, abortion has once again become a major issue on the campaign trail. Many Democratic candidates and their political action committees are now pooling funds for their abortion-centered advertisements in key battleground states. WION's very busy US correspondent Susan Tehrani brings us this report.
Ever since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the question has been, what will be its effect on the midterm elections?
This election is about reproductive freedom. If you care about this, you need to turn out and vote.
Democratic candidates and their super PACs have spent nearly $18 million to air more than 100 abortion-centered broadcast TV ads in some 4 dozen battleground states as of the end of September, 3 times what they spent on abortion in the 2018 general election. Even as the GOP attacks the party's performance on the economy and crime, inflation included, Democrats hope abortion may sway undecided voters to look past their pocketbooks. Here is an ad by Michigan Democrat Representative Dan Kildee taking aim at his opponent's pro-life stance.
Never think it'll happen to you, but I was brutally raped in my own apartment. Weeks later, I started hemorrhaging and an abortion saved my life. So when Paul Young called abortion made-up rights for women, I was personally disgusted. Young would outlaw abortion even in cases of rape, incest, or the health of the mother. Who is Paul Young to tell me what I can and cannot do after I was raped?
I'm Dan Kildee, and I approve this message.
Kildee's opponent, Paul Young, mainly focuses on the economy, secure borders, and criticizes his Democrat rival for supporting, quote, socialism and taxpayer funding of abortions. Vulnerable Democrats in other parts of the country are trying out similar messages in Central Virginia and Pennsylvania, to name a few. The vast majority of Americans are pragmatic and moderate. with fewer than 20% identifying as very liberal or very conservative. And Americans broadly all want the same thing: safety, economic security, and a return to post-pandemic normalcy. While abortion is important, it's yet to be seen whether or not it will sway undecided and independent voters come November 8th. Susan Tehmani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
North Korea has fired a ballistic missile over Japan for the first time in 5 years. It prompted the government in Tokyo to take emergency measures, calling on people to seek shelter as the rocket's trajectory was being identified. The firing also triggered a response from South Korea.
Imagine you're in a train and suddenly the alarms go off and you hear an announcement about missile firing. This is what happened to many travelers in the Sapporo region of Japan. North Korea fired a missile which fell into the Pacific Ocean after covering a distance of 4,600 kilometers. This is the first missile to be fired over Japan since 2017. Officials in Japan and South Korea say the missile is an intermediate-range ballistic missile. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida immediately condemned the firing.
Earlier, North Korea launched a ballistic missile that flew over Japan and is believed to have landed in the Pacific Ocean. The firing, which followed a recent series of launches by North Korea, is a reckless act, and I strongly condemn it.
The unexpected launch prompted Japan to take safety measures. Trains were suspended in the northern region. Many travelers were left waiting for the resumption of services. Authorities made loudspeaker announcements urging citizens to take shelter underground or inside buildings. Missile alert systems were activated.
Many missiles have been launched before. I understood the situation, but I had a hard time realizing what was happening until now. This time, the missile flew and the alarm went off for Tokyo's southern island and Hokkaido. The launching of the J alert really made me aware that the danger is real and close to me.
Sirens could be heard wailing in Japan's northern prefecture of Aomori. News channels across Japan covered the event. The missile firing also drew widespread condemnation. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol warned the North of a stern response.
North Korea's reckless nuclear provocation will face resolute response from our military as well as our allies and the international community.
The White House said in a statement that the firing is destabilizing, adding that it shows North Korea's blatant disregard for United Nations Security Council resolutions. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke to the foreign ministers of Japan and South Korea. He emphasized on America's commitment to the defense of South Korea and Japan. He also reaffirmed the importance of close trilateral cooperation to maintain stability in the region. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
For more on this story, we spoke earlier to WION's Chris Gilbert in the Japanese capital, Tokyo.
Things have calmed down a little bit in Tokyo. Now it's business as usual for many people after a very rude wake-up this morning with sirens and emergency alerts. People are used to receiving these during earthquakes, but not so much during missiles that are flying over their head. We've just also learned in the last hour or so reports that the United States and South Korea have responded to the launch by conducting bombing drills in the region. South Korea had warned it would have a strong show of force and response, and that may be it. Very interesting, considering that Pyongyang has suggested that the missile launch was in part in response to joint trilateral military drills by South Korea, United States, and Japan in the region. Another reason that they've said the launch was because it wanted to show a show of force about how far its new missiles can reach, 4,500 kilometers. The the longest ever by a North Korean missile, and Pyongyang is suggesting that that Guam and the US military base there is now within reaching distance of its missile capabilities.
Iran is once again at the centre of Western sanctions, this time over its deadly crackdown on protesters. US President Joe Biden says he will impose further costs on the perpetrators of the violence. He added that Washington would continue holding Iranian officials accountable and support the Iranian people's peaceful right to protest. The American president, however, did not provide details about the new measures that he's considering. Along with the US, Canada has also imposed fresh sanctions against Iran for alleged human rights violations. A statement released by the Canadian government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau refers to Iran's systemic persecution of women and specifically highlights what it calls the shocking allegations committed by Iran's morality police, which led to the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She died on September the 16th, 3 days after being arrested by morality police who accused her of failing to wear her head covering properly. Police claim she died of a heart attack, but the family says she was in a coma caused by the beatings she received at the hands of the morality police. Massive protests have broken out across Tehran since her death was disclosed. Iranian state news agencies say around 60 people, including a dozen policemen, have been killed in the deadly protests, while NGO Iran Human Rights says at least 133 people have been killed. On Monday, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, backed the security forces' crackdown on protesters. That crackdown has been globally condemned. He also accused the US and Israel of planning and fueling the protests.
دختر جوانی در گذشت، خب حادثه تلخی بود، دل ما هم سوخت، ولی واکنش به این حادثه بدون اینکه تحقیقی شده باشه، بدون اینکه هیچ گونه امر مسلمی وجود داشته باشه، این نبود که عده‌ای بیان خیابان رو ناامن کنند، ناامنی رو برای مردم به وجود بیارن.
Lawyers for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have asked an American judge to dismiss a case accusing him of ordering the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The lawyer, Michael Kellogg, argued that bin Salman's role as the new prime minister affords him legal immunity and added that the US federal court should dismiss claims by the plaintiff against the Crown Prince for lack of jurisdiction. Jamal Khashoggi was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October of 2018. US intelligence claims that the killing was ordered by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom's de facto ruler. The immunity claim comes amid legal wrangling in the US over whether the case can be brought against the Crown Prince. In July, the federal court asked the US government to weigh in on whether immunity conferred to heads of state applies in this case. The government was initially supposed to submit a response by Monday, but last week the court granted the government another 45 days due to recent developments in Saudi Arabia, including a government reshuffle that led to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman being appointed as the kingdom's new prime minister. In October of 2020, Khashoggi's fiancée and a human rights group founded by the slain journalist filed a lawsuit that names bin Salman and 20 other Saudi officials as being responsible for the murder. It claimed the Crown Prince, along with the others, carried out a plot permanently to silence Khashoggi after he planned to use his group to espouse democratic reform and promote human rights in the kingdom. Big news today in the world of tech. The European Parliament has passed a new law imposing a single charger standard for all smartphones within the bloc. They will all be required to be charged by a USB-C port. The measure passed with an overwhelming majority. For Android users, it will cause no major headache. Most Androids already come with the USB-C charging port. But for users of Apple's iPhones, well, this means potential trouble. Apple will have to drop their Lightning port for the USB-C. The world's second largest seller of smartphones, Apple already uses the USB-C charging ports for its iPads and its laptops, but it has resisted changing the ports on its iPhones. Apple says the new law will stifle innovation. However, EU policymakers have lauded the new rule, saying it will simplify the life of Europeans, reduce tons of electric waste created by obsolete chargers, and reduce costs for consumers. The EU move may influence other parts of the world. The bloc is home to 450 million people, and regulatory changes in the EU often set global industry norms. It's a development known as the Brussels effect. Most devices have been given 2 years to comply with the new rules. Makers of laptops will have extra time until the year 2026. It is unclear whether Apple will immediately comply with the new ruling or seek to appeal it legally. Apple offers wireless charging for its latest iPhones, so there is speculation in the tech world that it might do away with charging ports altogether. Reality TV star and entrepreneur Kim Kardashian has agreed to settle charges brought by the US Securities and Exchange Commission for promoting cryptocurrency via her social media accounts. Kardashian will pay $1.26 million in fines for unlawfully touting cryptocurrency on social media without disclosing the payment that she received for the plug. She has also agreed not to promote any cryptocurrency asset securities for the next 3 years. She received $250,000 for advertising Ethereum Max. Kardashian's Instagram post in question contained a link to the Ethereum Max website, which then provided instructions for potential investors to purchase EMAX tokens. According to the federal securities laws, anyone who promotes a crypto asset security must disclose the nature, source, and amount of compensation they received in exchange for the promotion. Finally from us today, feline fans in California have been celebrating at CatCon 2022. It is a celebration of all things cat-related, combining pop culture and cat culture. It even features cosplay and appearances by one cat that commands millions of online followers. Our final report today will give you pause, get it, for thought.
I love cats. It's what it's all about. I wear nothing but cat shirts, hang around with cat people, collect cat figurines.
I am advised that if you are in California and you missed that show, it would be a catastrophe. That's WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. for this Tuesday. I'll be back again tomorrow, same time, same place, with another edition of the programme. Until then, stay with WION for all your news updates. And remember, world is one.